Hello and welcome back once again to the channel. We are on the side of a mountain. I have no idea where. This road will eventually, or this route will eventually take us up into Mount Glorious. I'm coming out of Brisbane, where I just dropped off my 1300GS to get its 10,000 kilometer servicing at Morgan and Wacker BMW. They were kind enough to loan me a BMW F800GS. Now, this might not strike you as the most exciting bike, the sexiest thing you could get on in the world, but I'm still glad to be here. I'm happy to have something new to try out and play with for a couple hours. And I thought, hey, I have a motor vlog. Let's make some content. So let's do it. The F800GS is 895 cubic centimeters of unleashed parallel twin fury. It has 87 horsepower, 91 newton meters of torque. That's pretty good. The seat height is 815 mils, and it costs, for this version, which is the triple black version, it costs just under 20,000 Australian dollars. The first thing I talk about whenever I do one of these reviews is comfort, because that's honestly the first thing I notice when I get on a bike. And this bike is pretty comfortable. It's got the typical BMW rider triangle layout, so from that standpoint it feels familiar. As I said, the seat height is 815 mils, and it's, you know, very approachable. This is definitely a good bike for riders who aren't that tall or intimidated by bigger bikes. I can, of course, I can easily flat foot. I'm, you know, probably average height at 185 centimeters or 6'1". And I have a pretty good inseam of 33 or 34 inches, something like that. But when I'm stopped on this bike, not only can I flat foot, but I can stand up off of it. Like, if I stand straight up, my butt is not on the bike. Do with that information as you will. The seat, it's okay. It's, you know, pretty typical one-piece, two-level seat. You know, the pillion section is slightly higher than the rider section. And the seat foam feels like it's sagging under me a little bit. As of this morning, I was about 108 kg, shameful. So maybe the average target audience for this bike is someone who weighs a little bit less than I do. And maybe the seat foam reflects that. So I don't love the saddle. If this was my bike, I would almost certainly be replacing it with the Sergeant saddle. But that aside, the bike is very comfortable. My shoulders are, I'm in basically a sit-up and beg position. My shoulders are very relaxed. I will say, I'm used to having pretty much best-in-class wind protection on my 1300GS. So having a windscreen that makes this bike basically a naked is unusual for me. But I will say, the airflow is very clean. I'm not getting beaten up. It's not overly loud. Of course, I'm not on the motorway, and I don't think I'm going to go on the motorway. So this bike is very, very flickable. But you can see I am riding very conservatively. That's for a couple of reasons. One, we've had some rain, and these roads can get a little greasy. Two, the brakes aren't the greatest. I don't have a ton of confidence in them. The front brake is okay at best. The back brake is essentially worthless as a stopping device. When I'm sitting at a light, it works okay for holding you in place. This bike does not have hill hold assist as you wouldn't expect that at the price point that this bike comes in at. So, you know, you got to use the back brake. Oh, and that's another thing, and I guess you could call this comfort related. I'll talk more about the transmission later, but I will say impossible to find neutral on this bike. So you're going to be holding in the clutch at lights. And, you know, if you listen to Motor Jitsu, maybe you should be doing that anyways. Maybe you should always be in gear and have your foot on the back brake. I disagree with that. I'm going to do a video on that in the not too distant future. And I'll tell you my way of doing things. But this bike wouldn't allow for my way of doing things. Because the transmission it's just not possible finding neutral. So the back brake is good for, you know, sitting at a stoplight, or, you know, maybe for helping you adjust your line mid-turn if you're a back brake guy in the turns, which you probably should be. Most people say that the back brake is essential for adjusting lines. So yeah, brakes, not the greatest. The engine is very nice. It's a parallel twin. It doesn't have the most character in the world, but I've ridden worse. It's got a nice growl to it. I can, let's see, I'm at 4,000 RPM right now, and I can feel some vibes, but probably just enough to be counted more as character than as being a vibey bike. Yeah, those vibes stay pretty consistent. But I don't think you'd notice them that much. I mean, it's not really coming through the bars that much. Maybe if you were on the motorway doing 110 for 5 or 6 hours, your hands might start to get a little fatigued from that. But that said, for this kind of riding that I'm doing right now, this engine's great. It's got a good amount of torque. The bike weighs, you know what, I actually don't know what the bike weighs, but I'll look that up and put it in on the screen. It feels very light. It's, of course, it's much lighter than my GS. It actually feels lighter than my Versys did. I don't think it is, but it might be. Who knows? Well, actually, there are people who know, and I will consult with them. And by them, I mean the internet, and I'll find out which one is lighter. Ah, rare, nice bit of pavement. The steering on this bike is very light. And now the road is all wet. Awesome. The steering is very light. This is a good handling bike. If this was my bike and I was used to these roads, I'd be thrashing it right here. One thing that I do on my GS is I cheat a little bit when I'm going on roads and twisties that I don't know. I just let my eyes flick down to the GPS and see what the turns are going to be looking like. I can't do that on this bike because the GPS is too far down. It's really not a huge deal. I'm not holding it against it or anything. Yeah, the engine's quite peppy. I think that's a good word for it. I think, yeah, it's got pep. If I recall correctly, this is tuned down. Oh, wow, yikes. This bike is tuned down a little bit from the F900, which I believe is the same engine. I always thought that was a little weird the way they designated the two. It used to be the F850 and F750, and now it's the F900 and F800. But yeah, I think the 900 has a tune that allows for more power, which means you could probably get a little bit more power out of this bike if you wanted to give it a tune or something. And the sound isn't bad either. It's, you know, parallel twins usually sound okay. This one is no exception. I've heard a couple of pops and gurgles on this ride. And I imagine you could get even more if you were to put a tune and a pipe on here, you know. Give Mr. Akrapovich a little bit more of your hard-earned cash. But I don't think you have to, really. Like, stock out of the box, it's pretty good. I'm having a good time on this thing. The suspension is also pretty good. I have it in dynamic mode right now, so I'm feeling the bumps a little more. I don't know if you were able to notice the tread damage that some larger vehicle had done to the roads a little ways down the mountain, but I felt every one of those. But when I had it in road mode, it was compliant. It was smoother. The damping was less aggressive than it is right now. I will say I can feel a difference in both the throttle and in the suspension in dynamic mode versus road mode. I'm not trying any other modes today, but that's always appreciated. The throttle map is clearly more aggressive. Yeah, this bike is fun. Feels like a Grom compared to my GS. I'm not gonna lie, it feels very short. If you're looking for, I don't know if I said it before, apologies if I did. I'll probably just cut this out if I did. But if you're looking for a city commuter and something to have fun in the twisties on the weekends, this would be a great bike for that. Mount Glorious. The Mount Glorious Cafe. All right, back in a few. Hey, I did it. I found neutral. Okay, so what have we ascertained so far? Pretty comfortable, good engine, flickable, good handling, okay brakes at best, pretty mediocre transmission. This is the triple black variant, and it does have a quick shifter on it. Unfortunately, that quick shifter is attached to a transmission that I am not getting along with very well. Shifts feel really spongy on this bike, regardless of whether or not you're using the clutch. And it is basically impossible to find neutral. Oh, by the way, this bike does have dynamic DSA suspension. That's the kind of thing that means anything to you. I've been thinking about what this bike's comparables are. And originally I was going to compare it to bikes like the Tiger 900 and the Ducati Multistrada V2. But the more I think about it, the more I think that's not really a fair comparison, just because of the price point. This is a $20,000 bike. The Tiger 900 is $26,000, $28,000 with luggage, which I still think is a really good deal. And the Multistrada, I think, I don't know that price offhand. I think that's closer to $30,000. So it's not really fair to compare this bike to those bikes. I don't know a lot of bikes at this price point, to be honest. Like the MT-09 is more, the Tracer GT is more. You know, most of the bikes that I generally look at are more expensive. And maybe I do myself a disservice at that, because this is a really nice bike. There's nothing you can do about the transmission. You could probably put some better brake shoes on this bike, maybe some sintered metal pads or something like that. Maybe even some steel braided lines if you were so inclined. And that would improve their performance. But the motor's great, the handling's great. You could put a bigger, like if you wanted to do some light touring, you could put a bigger windscreen on it. You could put some panniers on it. And you would have yourself a very economical bike that could do a lot of things well. Would I buy this bike? No, because I can afford nicer bikes. if I'm being perfectly honest, the transmission I think would be a deal killer for me. That's something that would annoy me to no end. Yeah, you know, maybe the front brake actually is pretty responsive in these downhill twisties. Maybe I was judging it a little harshly. The back brake sucks. I mean, there's no getting around that. That back brake is not good. But the front brake isn't terrible. It's just not great. Yeah, so if you're shorter and you want to be able to touch the ground securely, and you're not interested in muscling something as big as the 1300 around, you know, this bike would be a great option for you. I think this is a good bike. I think it's really worth a look in its price range. Of course, you could get a cheaper Honda, or, you know, maybe there is a Yamaha in this bike's class. I don't know what that would be, because, again, I don't shop in this class. And I'm not the biggest fan in the world of Hondas, especially since they just stole my local dealership from me. Thanks a lot, Honda. That's why Elite stopped carrying BMWs, because they started carrying Hondas and someone had to go. So could you find something less that gives you everything that this bike does? Probably. I mean, you can always find something that costs less. Just buy used. Just don't buy new. Just buy used. And you'll get something that costs less. It was pointed out to me an infinite amount of times that I could have gotten a 1250 GS for way less than I got my 1300. The problem being, I didn't want a 1250 GS. I wanted the 1300 for everything that it brings to the table. Yeah, if you're done with your L's and P's, that is if you live in Australia and you're going through the graduated driver's license system, and you're ready to step up to a bigger bike, but don't want something that's completely uncontrollable, where you're going to get that benefit of the German engineering. And respect to BMW for making this bike. It's great. Lolly's Lookout coming up. Okay, is that the lookout I was at the other day? Yes, that's it. Jolly's Lookout, not Lolly's Lookout. Well, you know, trying to read off this tiny screen. Jolly's Lookout. Okay. For anyone asking me, I just put out a video on the first in my Great Roads of Australia series. About 12 people have watched it. It's a little disappointing, but this is the lookout I was at. Jolly's Lookout. Let's see, we have a steering damper down there. Dynamic ESA. I said DSA before. That was a mistake. It's got a quick shifter. It's also filthy. Okay, back in a few. Definitely a lot easier to push back like this than my GS. Yeah, so the throttle, whoa. The throttle right there is definitely a little snatchy. Given that it's a lower cost bike, I don't know that I can really savage it for that, but I feel like fueling is a problem that's been solved at this point, and I think BMW could have done a better job there. That's the kind of thing where I would consider investing in a tune to clear that up. Yeah, just gorgeous views from up here. Gonna have to bring my girl up here for lunch one day. Yeah, so the two real downsides of this bike for me are the transmission and the fueling. The brakes, like I said, the brakes are okay. They're not great, but they're not so bad that I would call them a negative as a whole. The back brakes are pretty embarrassing, but you know, Who uses the back brake anyways? The fueling is a fixable problem. The transmission, you know, it might be made a little bit better with a tune if you have a shop that had, like, I don't know if BT Moto is going to be releasing a tune for this bike. You know, so I'm not sure where you would go to get an ECU flash for this, but I'm sure there are places, and if you do your research, you can probably find one that will help you smooth out that throttle, maybe make the transmission a little bit easier to deal with. And neither of those are huge complaints. It's a pain to not be able to find neutral. So far, I've been on this bike for a few hours, and I've only managed to find neutral one time. It's really crazy. What's good about this bike? What are its pros? Well, the weight is fantastic. The engine is punchy and fun. It's not an engine that's going to keep you from being able to close your eyes or anything. Like, it's not going to be yanking your eyelids back. But it's good. You know, it's good. It's fun. The handling is very nice. The handling is very light. I would call this bike, I would go so far as to call this bike playful. It might not have the greatest personality in the world. Its personality is fine. It might not have the most memorable personality in the world, but it's pretty good. Like, it's got some character to it. Absolutely great bike for an around town bike. Absolutely great bike for just coming up to the twisties and playing for a little while. How is it on the highway? That's the big question. I don't have any motorway plans in my life for the rest of the time that I'm going to be on this bike. But I imagine it'd be just like any other naked. And it's not really a naked. I think this screen would be enough to keep a good chunk of the wind off your chest, which would reduce fatigue for sure. I don't think I would look at this bike if I was going to be doing the kind of riding that I do, which involves a fair amount of touring. But you know what? I rode my Versa 650 on the track. I got my backside handed to me, but I still did it, and I had fun doing it, and I learned a lot about the bike. If you could do that with that bike, you could take this bike on the track, no problem. You know, you'll if you're a good enough rider, you'll be able to keep up with the C group, maybe even a B group, probably not an A group. There you go. That's the view. If you're not married to the triple black, I think you could get one for a little bit less than this one. Once again, I will put the prices down below. This one, in its current spec, I think would cost 19,700 Australian dollars. Do your own local currency conversions. I don't know what the US dollar currently sits at, and British pounds are, I don't even think they really exist. Because I do feel like these bikes, no, you know what? Again, I'm going to have to say, no, they're not really comparable due to cost, because this bike costs 19,000 or 19,700, and the newest and latest Versa 650 costs something. It's either $13,500 or $14,000, something like that. So a pretty big gap in price. But the engine on this bike by itself makes this bike worth the difference in price, in my opinion. And that is coming from a big fan of the Kawasaki Versa 650 platform. I loved that bike, and you could do way worse than to have one of those. But yeah, tough to compare. I mean, this bike does have a lot more features. It has electronic suspension, it has rider modes, it has, you know, this cool looking dash, the cool BMW dash. It has the system that allows you to use your GPS. It has the multifunction wheel. I will never call it the whiz wheel, Andy, never. So yeah, quite a few more features on this bike than on the Versys. And quite a few more dollars. Let's look and see what kind of fuel mileage we're doing right now. So it's doing 5 liters per 100 kilometers. That's actually that's pretty comparable to what I got on my Versys. That's a pretty good test for the engine right there, to be honest. I'm going up probably about an 8% grade, and I just opened it up in 4th gear, and it didn't love it. It didn't love doing that, but it did it. Okay. All right, the back brake has successfully stopped me. Thought ahead. There we go. Okay, I've gotten neutral twice. I feel like this is a really good bike. Whether or not you want to pay $20,000 for a bike of this spec is up to you, but it actually, I think, comes with a fair amount of pretty premium features. But some of the spec that it has on it, like the nice dash, the electronic suite, you know, it's not too far away from the Triumph Tiger. The Triumph Tiger is a better bike. It's also a more expensive bike. If you, and in fact, I'll come right out and say it, if you have the extra $6,000 to $8,000 to where you can afford the Tiger, get the Tiger. It's better, it's more fun, better engine, way better transmission, better suspension. Not that this suspension is bad. Let's switch back into road mode. There we go. But if you don't have that extra money, or if you just want that gateway drug into GS ownership, you're coming off your first bike, you're coming off of a graduated license system like in Australia or the UK or something like that, or in the US if you just want to be silly and get this as a first bike. Yeah, and to be honest, if you are from the US and you grew up riding dirt bikes like I did, you'll be able to handle this bike just fine as a first bike. The view of this bike from the mindset of, from the perspective of price, might change in the not too distant future because of the CF Motos and other Chinese bikes that are coming to market with a great price point. I'm gonna have to see quite a bit more out of them before I'm sold. You know, how do they stand up to the test of time? What is their dealership network like? You know, things like that. With BMW, that stuff is all done and dusted. Their dealer network is solid. Their service, I don't think anyone gives better service than BMW does. There might be some companies that are comparable, but I'll tell you right now, in Australia, you're not getting better service for a CF Moto. You just gotta hope that the shop that you bought it out of is a good one. I don't think I would consider this bike a long distance tourer. Of course, you can make it competent in that regard, but I think this is more for the commuter, the person who wants to use it as transportation and still be able to have fun on the weekends. So yeah, go to your local BMW dealer. Tell them you want to try out the F800GS. They will be surprised because most people going in there want to try out the 1300 or one of the XRs or something. They have a lot of good bikes in their lineup. I think the F800GS gets overlooked. I think more people should look at this bike. I think even if it's not the right bike for you, It's a bike that will help you, inform you as to what the right bike is. So with all that said, I think it's time to wrap this up. As always, folks, thanks so much for coming along for the ride. Get home safe, and I hope to see you next time. The next time will be me camping out in Maroochydore, probably in the rain. I do love to camp, but what the hell are you doing? I do love to camp, but not so much in the rain. But really, all I need is like a half-hour window to set up my tent and not get my sleeping bag wet, and I'll be fine. So yeah, that's it. Thanks, folks. See you next time. I really want to peel this film off. I really, really want to peel that off. Not my bike though. Not gonna.